Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 2 of season 2 of the 919 College Football Podcast. You're here with your hosts, Daniel Adams and Beau Worley. Beau, tell them what's going on.
What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the 919 College Football Podcast. We have a lot to talk about today. We have no shortage of exciting talking points nationally and locally. No shortage of controversy and no shortage of good things to look forward to with the college football season.
I hear you, buddy. So you want to get into a little bit of controversy, it sounds like. That was the first thing you touched on. We're not over here evaluating games. We're into the drama of college football.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing when you talk about controversy already in this season, you have to look no further than last Saturday's game at Texas A&M, and we'll be sure to get into that later. But I think that it was. I don't really think that it decided the game, which a lot of people think that it would. But we'll talk about that later, and we'll get your thoughts on that as well, Daniel. So we're going to kind of split this show up into two separate parts. We're going to have our national talking points and our local talking points. We're going to get into our triangle teams here, UNC, Duke, and the Wolfpack. So we're going to start with our national talking points, though. So Daniel, I'm going to ask you who have you been impressed with the most so far?
I would say the team I've been impressed with the most, up to this point, has probably been either Georgia or Oklahoma. Now it's tough to really rate either one of those teams because neither of them have played high quality opponents. Oklahoma played Florida Atlantic and UCLA. And Florida Atlantic, it's a little too early to gauge how good they're going to be. Those group of 5 schools are often hard to get a good grasp on how good they're going to be until a little bit later on. And then, of course, UCLA, Power 5 school, but they're in a bit of transition mode. Before the season started, I really wasn't sold on Kyler Murray, but he's put up some pretty huge numbers. He's definitely in the Heisman race at this point, and he's filled Baker Mayfield's shoes pretty well. But then going back to Georgia, they just beat Austin Peay in week 1 as expected, and then came out and smoked South Carolina in Columbia last weekend, which was really eye-opening. I think a lot of people had an upset pick there, at least favored South Carolina to cover the spread, which was 10.5 going into the game. So I would say Georgia and Oklahoma have been the 2 most impressive teams I've seen up to this point. What about you, Beau?
Well, I would have to say that I'm more impressed with Oklahoma than I am Georgia so far. I think Oklahoma's done what they've got to do with their schedule. Georgia, I think I'm not meaning that I'm not impressed with them, but South Carolina, I was pretty high on South Carolina, and it was impressive that Georgia did. They kind of sent a message to the SEC East. I think some people, including myself, thought maybe it wasn't a done deal. Yeah. I think after last week, now it is a done deal. Florida losing to Kentucky, first time in over 30 years, and then in the swamp, I believe they lost,
which is a horrible start for Dan Mullen. Even Will Muschamp beat Kentucky.
Yeah, and then obviously the Dogs going into the Columbia and whipping up on South Carolina like they did, really did not sweat that game at all. So that was impressive, but I'm really more impressed with the job that Herm Edwards has already done at Arizona State. It is still early. I don't want to get too hyped on them, but I think you can't deny that they've been impressive with their win, especially last week against Michigan State. I know Michigan State struggled to beat Utah State at home in week 1, but I think still to beat a top 15 team at home, and especially he's a brand new coach who hasn't coached in a long time.
Right.
You know, they showed a lot of guts and a lot of heart at the end of that game, and I think it was probably because of him, even though he's been out of coaching for a long time.
Well, he's a good motivator, and certainly he knows what he's doing. So
yeah, and compared to some of these other new coaches in the Pac-12, like Kevin Sumlin and also Chip Kelly at UCLA, they're both 0-2 to start with, and especially Arizona, who's looked terrible. So I'm really impressed with Arizona State, what they've done so far, and we'll see if they can keep it up moving forward. But yeah, I'm certainly impressed with Oklahoma. Clemson's win was at Texas A&M, I think, was decently impressive. I think that could be, because it was a true road game, I think that could have been the best win so far of the 2 weeks. But we can talk about that call now. I mean, obviously, if you've probably seen it by now, the Texas A&M wide receiver was reaching for the goal line that would have put them down 2 in the fourth quarter with only a couple minutes left. He was hit at the goal line. He let go of the ball, and it seemed like the ball went out of bounds really at the 1-inch line rather than through the end zone, which is what the refs called and reviewed and could not overturn. What did you see on that play?
Well, from my angle and the laws of physics that I tend to live my life by or according to, as he's reaching out, as the Texas A&M receiver is reaching out for the goal line with the ball, the Clemson player came in from the side and sort of caught the ball with his fist. Now, to me, that would mean that the ball has to fly towards out of bounds rather than straight ahead in the back of the goal. But again, that's one of those situations where I knew when they reviewed it, the call on the field was not going to be changed because there was no indisputable evidence. So what I really would have liked to have seen is make that call on the field that it was out of bounds at the 1, right? Texas A&M is driven all the way down the field, and then there's a questionable call, and they're getting punished for this. Now, this ref, maybe he thought he was 100% sure that the ball went out the back of the end zone, but clearly that was not the case. So on the field, make the call that the ball was out of bounds, and then have video review to potentially change that to reverse.
Right. So
change.
What you're saying
I don't think
is
you should change possession on a situation like that. But just even a bigger point to harp on, and sorry for cutting you off, Beau, I think that's a horrible rule that if you fumble out of the back of the end zone in that situation, that you lose possession. I think that's stupid. College football should look at that.
Well, what would you rather? What would you rather have?
Only 5 minutes in.
What would you rather have? What would you rather the rule be?
If you fumble out of the back of the end zone, I think you have one of two options. One, you get the ball back, but at your own 25. So you essentially just have to restart the drive. Okay. Or the other team has the opportunity to punt to you, like a safety type deal. I just think I don't know. I think it's a little bit silly that if you fumble out of the back of the end zone on a play like that you lose possession. So I've got a few bones to pick with college football and their rules, but that one just came to mind after last week and what an important game that was. However,
I agree with you. I agree with you that that the call on the field should have been out at the 1-inch line, and that way they could have reviewed it and the indisputable evidence could have proven otherwise. I don't think if they had called it on the field that it was out at the 1-inch line, I don't think they would have been able to overturn that. Right, just like they didn't think they could overturn it going out of bounds from the end zone.
Exactly.
But I think it was closer than than the. I think it was closer to being out at the 1-inch line than out of the end zone. That being said, Texas A&M still had to convert a 2-point conversion, which they later had the opportunity to, and the ball, and they threw a pick. They threw an interception.
Right.
Game over.
Right.
So that, I mean, that I don't think that decided the game, and I don't think that and people that argue that, I think, are wrong, because if I were to pick Texas A&M's offense with a brand new coach, with I believe that was a freshman quarterback as well.
As a sophomore
quarterback. Yeah. Against Clemson's defense that has been in the college football playoff for the past 3 years. One play to decide it all. I'm putting all my money on Clemson's defense to stop.
Yeah.
For the stop. So I don't think that you can put the game all on that one call, especially because they did end up scoring, and they didn't get the 2-point conversion. So I think that Clemson deserved that win, and I think it's the most impressive win of the season so far, given it was at Kyle Field, which is one of the toughest places to play in the country.
Right. So when
go ahead.
We're looking back, and I just wanted to touch on, because I don't want anyone to forget about Week 1, and we're talking about impressive wins. I think something that has really kind of affected the landscape at this point is the amount of talk that has been about Washington losing to Auburn. And I think that's a bit unfair. I certainly don't think that was a bad loss. Washington, in fact, probably should have won that game. They were in the red zone twice, sort of coughed up opportunities. They tried to do that option play, which was pretty ridiculous, and then allowed Auburn to score with under 3 or 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And that was essentially a road game. They showed a statistic on ESPN about 42,000 tickets had been sold to Auburn, and I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 had been sold to Washington. So what was essentially a road game for Washington, they lost by 5, potentially should have won that game, and now everyone's saying that Washington and the Pac-12 are in big trouble for the college football playoff. What's your take on that?
No, I don't think that they're eliminated by any means. I picked Washington in the college football playoff, and I'm still going to stick by that. I think they shot themselves in the foot like you said, in the Auburn game. It was more of a away environment. This week is huge for them. They're at Utah, which is a tough place to play. And Utah's looked pretty decent so far this year. They're 2-0, wins over Weber State and Northern Illinois. And Washington, no, I don't think they're out of it by any means, especially if they got to win out. They had to win out though. That's one thing. And they got Stanford. I believe it's they have Stanford. When is the Stanford game? If Stanford keeps winning, that even helps them out even more.
Stanford actually is ranked ahead of them now.
Yeah, you're right. Stanford in the AP poll is 9th. Washington is 10th. And that game is at Washington on November 3rd. So both teams, I think it's very helpful for the Pac-12 if two of those teams win out. And then Stanford plays at Notre Dame as well.
Right.
So that's another test that the Pac-12 can boost their resume. Who have you been most disappointed with this season?
Gosh, I think it begins and ends with Miami. I mean, Miami's just been horrible. I didn't necessarily think they would kill LSU in that opening game, but I thought they would win. They just looked terrible. LSU smoked them. The expectations for LSU were pretty high, after a 2-0 start, they're certainly increasing. But Miami and Michigan State, I've been pretty disappointed in. Michigan State, I had them contending in the Big Ten. I didn't necessarily have them coming out of the Big Ten East, but I had them contending and being right there in it. But at this point, after the Utah State game, that's a tough win. That was a very close game. And then going to Arizona State, which I don't think down the road will be a bad loss, but it certainly doesn't look great at this point. Those are the two teams I've been most disappointed in. What about you, Beau?
Yeah, I'm going to go with another state, and that's in the Sunshine State, Florida State.
Yeah.
They have not looked good at all under Willie Taggart in the first 2 weeks here. They did get a win over Samford, but that
was hard fought.
Yeah, it was hard fought, and they probably should have lost. And obviously they got blown out at home in an emotional game versus Virginia Tech, and they didn't get anything going really at that game. That could be another team that we can be impressed with later is the Hokies, but we'll have to wait and see on them. I think I'm not yet sold on the Hokies, and we'll get into this later. And I've got to say I'm disappointed in North Carolina, and how they've started their season out 0-2 in the fashion that they've started, and we'll get into more of that in more detail with the Heels later.
Yeah, we'll cover the local stuff in a little while. But one thing I did want to touch on with you though is a team like Wisconsin, and this seems to happen every year. So in the AP poll, Wisconsin started off at number 4. Week 1, they crush Western Kentucky, right? So they stay at home, they play Western Kentucky, get a big time win, not really challenged. Then the next week, week 2, they played New Mexico at home, beat them pretty severely as well. And now they find themselves ranked 6th. So teams are leapfrogging them. What do you think this says about Wisconsin down the road as the schedule continues to play out? Do you think Wisconsin is one of those teams that's in danger of, again, like last year, having a one-loss season and being left out of the college football playoff? Or you think their schedule's strong enough where even if they do have one loss, or maybe they don't, maybe they go in and lose the Big Ten championship game, do you still think that they can make it to the college football playoff? Or is it just one of those tales of sort of Wisconsin being blackmailed, for lack of a better word, from getting in the college football playoff? What do you think about that?
No, I think that I don't think that the rankings really matter right now. All the teams can jump over them as much as they want. This early in the season, I don't think you can really put much weight on that right now, especially because they do have some games where you can put some good wins on your resume.
Right.
And for Wisconsin, and when you do that, I think the college football playoff, obviously if they're undefeated, they're in. If they beat the champion of the Big Ten East, they're in.
Right.
With one loss, that's just tough. It's hard to say. I think it's hard. If that one loss is not in the Big Ten Conference Championship game, then I think that you can still put them in.
Yeah. So let's say the only thing is I don't know who would overtake them in the West. Do you think Iowa has a chance, or Nebraska? Nebraska looked pretty impressive. I think Scott Frost has at least changed the attitude in Nebraska.
They just lost to Colorado.
Well, Colorado is good. Colorado is ranked now.
I don't, and they just lost their quarterback. And the
Colorado
quarterback
is not ranked. Check that.
I'm not really sold on Nebraska or the Big Ten West. Other than Iowa, maybe Iowa can give them a game at Iowa. That's I think really that's the biggest test they'll have in the West.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, they're going to have to. Their biggest tests are going to come at Michigan, and also at Penn State.
Yeah. They drew a pretty tough crossover matchup there with both of those teams. So that's kind of the opposite of what it was last year, where I don't know who their crossovers were, but they didn't really play anyone. It was probably Maryland and Rutgers, maybe.
yeah. I don't think I don't, and I think they have enough meat on their schedule with those two teams to be able to, if they drop one, that does not by any means take them out of the conversation, especially if when they play the Big Ten East champion and they can beat them. I think which is different than last year. But let's take a look kind of to the future on some big games that we're looking forward to in the next couple of weeks here. And I'm going to go ahead and say it because it's what everyone's thinking. LSU at Jordan-Hare at Auburn. What do you think about that game, Daniel?
I think, that's going to be a good game. What's the line on that game looking like? I'm sure Auburn. What is it? Maybe Auburn by 2.5.
Auburn -10 right now.
Auburn -10. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I do think Auburn will win. I think it will be closer than that. I think certainly LSU has looked more impressive than people gave them credit for, myself included. I thought Ed Orgeron was destined to be fired at the end of the season. Not a huge Eddie O fan. However, he's got the Bayou Bengals playing pretty well right now. They did suffer a loss on the defensive end. One of their linebackers is now out for the season, so that'll be a blow. Auburn's just a little bit too strong offensively, and I'm not sure that LSU can match the points. If LSU can keep this to a 17-10 style game or 14-10 style, they might have a chance. But if Auburn breaks 21, I don't think LSU will be able to quite top 21 points. Auburn's defense is way better than Miami. Miami just looked outclassed in that first game. So Auburn's defense has the athletes that LSU does and matches up much better. So I just don't see LSU taking this game, especially at Jordan-Hare. What about you, Beau?
Well, I'll be rooting for the Bayou Bengals, no doubt. I think they'll definitely cover the spread, and I think you don't give the LSU offense enough credit. I don't think that you give the LSU defense enough credit just because of the Miami game. Don't ever underestimate the Bayou Bengals defense.
Is that the cardinal sin of college football podcasting?
That's the cardinal sin of the. You can doubt their offense. That's fine. That's fine. They have improved that. Yeah, but I don't think they're bad this year. I think they have a decent quarterback. Better quarterback than they've had in several years. But Auburn, you're right. I mean, you're right. Auburn is better offensively, but I think LSU's defense is one of the best in the nation. And the game is at Jordan-Hare, like I said before, but I'm taking LSU again. I think that they play for Ed Orgeron, and I think they buy in to him. They have a better offensive coordinator now that fits the system that they need more so than last year. So I'm looking forward to that game, but I'm taking the Tigers. Any chance Ole Miss comes back again and haunts Bama this weekend?
That's a good question. I don't see it happening. Ole Miss is down. They're going through sort of the NCAA sanction period. I know you're familiar with that, with your Tar Heels having gone through it recently. I don't see it happening. Tua Tagovailoa looks really good.
Did you say that right?
I think so. Someone challenged me to say it on the podcast, so that was me dropping it in there, and we'll see. We'll see if I get a cease and desist from Alabama to stop saying his name. But
sue you for slander.
I don't see it. Alabama's just been rolling per usual. I think you and I probably made a bad call when we said that Jalen Hurts was. Well, I don't know that we said he was a better quarterback, but that he should start. clearly we're not sitting there in Tuscaloosa like Nick Saban is watching practice every day. But Tua's looked really good. So
well, I think either way they would still be 2-0 at this point, whatever quarterback they threw out there.
They would, and it's hard. It's hard for. I can imagine in my football playing days, I didn't go through too many QB battles, but I can imagine that it's hard for Jalen Hurts to go from starting quarterback at Alabama with a 26-2 record to coming off the bench to someone who's younger than him and playing cold and not getting into that rhythm. So maybe partially he's not as good, and maybe partially it's just he can't find a rhythm in the limited amount of snaps that he's getting. So either way, you can chalk that one up, but it looks like Tua's got a pretty strong hold on.
Yeah, and lastly, we have Ohio State at TCU. I know you're a big Horned Frogs fan, Daniel. Who do you got?
I got TCU in this one. I'm a big Horned Frogs fan. I love Gary Patterson. I think that TCU sneaks this one out. Ohio State's got, they've played essentially two Group of Five teams in Oregon State, which was the easiest win of all time, and then Rutgers. Those are probably, unless they play Kansas next, those are probably the worst Power 5 teams.
Kansas and UNC.
Football. So I think this will be a challenge for them. It'll be a road game, even though I'm sure Ohio State will have a ton of fans there, because Ohio State travels well. But I think Gary Patterson and the Horned Frogs pull this one off. They're going to come out punching and just catch Ohio State right in the mouth with a good knockout punch and take this one. So we'll see if that plays out. But let's see, what's the line on that one, Beau?
-12. Ohio State -12.
Yeah, I would definitely take those points, that's for sure. If TCU doesn't win, I think it will definitely be within 12. What say you?
No, I don't agree. I think the Buckeyes win. Not easily. I think maybe I think maybe the Horned Frogs will cover the point, or I would take TCU in the points, but Ohio State will win the game. I think they're just too talented. I watched a little bit of the TCU game this week too, Friday night, and the quarterback didn't look too good. I'm not a big fan of his. So yeah, I'm taking Ohio State in that one. I believe it's the last game until before Urban Meyer's return to the sidelines in Columbus. So
that's correct. Yeah,
we'll take a look.
College game day will be there as well, so maybe another distraction.
All right, moving on to our area, the 919 North Carolina area. We have plenty of things to talk about locally here. It's really a tale of two different scenarios here. We have two teams that have looked pretty decent, done what they've needed to do. I think one team's looked better than the other, and then another team that is one of the worst in the nation, to put it bluntly.
Should I throw UNC in that list of Oregon State, Rutgers, Kansas, and now UNC?
I think UNC is a tier below. Kansas has a win. Kansas has a win. They have an away win.
What? The Hurricane Florence might be the best thing for UNC. Now they won't have to play Central Florida at home, potentially. They can just go ahead and never make up that game and save the embarrassment of a loss.
Well, I remember the last time we played in Hurricane Matthew in 2016, Virginia Tech came to town and beat us 109-3. So yeah, we obviously don't do good in hurricane type conditions, and it's too bad we don't have our indoor practice facility completed yet, or else that could have came in handy for the practice and maybe even the game, but I doubt it. But yeah, I think that Duke has looked the best out of the three teams here, out of the state and the Tar Heels. But Daniel Jones has gotten hurt. Got hurt.
It's bittersweet. They went up to Northwestern. Duke did. had a good win over Northwestern. The second half, the offense was, sort of sputtered out a little bit, but that's what happens when your QB1 goes down. But the defense played well enough to pick up the slack and keep the score at 21-7. The defense also had a key loss in cornerback Mark Gilbert, who was preseason All-American. He, I believe, had a hip injury that is going to keep him out for the rest of the year. So that is a tough blow for the Devils. It'll be interesting to see how the backup quarterback Quentin Harris plays. He hardly threw the ball when he came in. It was mostly run plays, and I think part of that was the game plan as Duke was playing well on defense and just wanted to preserve that lead and keep the clock running. So it'll be interesting to see on Saturday at Baylor if he slings the ball around a little bit more. But it's a bit of an uncertain timetable as far as I'm aware as to when Daniel Jones will make it back. So hopefully in the meantime, Duke can hold on, keep some wins rolling. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Baylor. And even with Daniel Jones, I wouldn't be surprised if they lost to Baylor. When I was doing my preseason predictions, I didn't have them coming out of the first 4 games 4-0. So I see them losing 1. Now, the 4th game is Central, which I assume they will win. So if they come out of their first 4 3-1, I'm happy with that.
But I think that the Daniel Jones injury, I'm reading here now, it's a fractured clavicle.
Okay.
So that I assume that's going to keep him out for several weeks.
Right.
But I think that's one of the injuries that you can probably come back and recover from.
Unfortunately, it's in his left shoulder, so it's not in his throwing shoulder. So that's hopefully will speed up the recovery.
Yeah, I mean, and he threw for 3 touchdowns against Northwestern. That's just really unfortunate for the Devils that he took that blow and broke his clavicle. And so now onto the Wolfpack. They've done what they needed to do against lesser talent, lesser programs, both at home. A little bit of slow starts in both of them. James Madison, I think, is a good team. Even although they're FCS, they were in the national championship of two of the years, 2 of the past years, the past 2 years, and so I think. Maybe it's first game of the year, probably some jitters, some things to work out, but they took care of business, and they took care of business against Georgia State last week. And now the big one, if they're able to play it in Raleigh, is versus West Virginia, who's looked like an offensive juggernaut so far this season.
Yeah, and this might be actually a blessing in disguise for State if the weather is just, if it's pouring down rain, high winds, that might keep Will Greer and company from slinging the ball all over Carter Finley Stadium, make them a little bit more one-dimensional where NC State can kind of funnel the running backs into that defensive line. Mm-hmm. This could be a blessing in disguise. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago when Hurricane Matthew was coming through. State was playing Notre Dame that weekend, and that was – the monsoons were coming down, and that was fumble after fumble, and it was a really low-scoring game. So if the conditions are bad, this might be another one of those. See if we can just hold on to the ball. Maybe West Virginia will make an error, or throw an interception, pick 6, something like that. This could be a really good opportunity for State to get a win when the elements are really hampering West Virginia's offensive attack.
Yeah, definitely. And looking forward to that after that at Marshall, and then in the conference play with at home versus UVA, versus Boston College at home. So they play 5 of their first 7 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of their first 6 games are at home.
Yeah.
Which is pretty surprising. I don't see how anyone gets to do that.
Down the road. Well, that's what you get when you schedule. They finally scheduled a Power 5 team, but they used to just play Marshall, William and Mary. I know some of my NC State friends will get on me for this, but NC State's never known for packing in those good schools, those good out-of-conference games. So You can control the home and home series is there, the contracts when you're playing smaller schools. So it'll be interesting to see if they can continue to squeak out these wins. But I will agree, even though they've done what they've needed to do, they have not looked too impressive.
I think second place in the Atlantic is between them and Boston College.
Yeah.
Right now.
Especially after the way Florida State's playing.
Yeah, Florida State hasn't looked good at all. Wake might have something to say about that. Louisville as well. State plays at Louisville. Wake, I don't think Wake can beat State. I don't think they have the talent this year. But they're at Clemson in October 20th. They're at Death Valley, so we'll circle that one and keep an eye out for it and see how both teams are headed. And now on to Chapel Hill, to the lowly Tar Heels. And just, God, how bad have they been in the past 2 weeks? I don't think that any Tar Heel fan thought that they were going to be good this year, but they certainly didn't think they were going to be this bad.
Yeah. It's been a rough year in Chapel Hill, and I thought the Cal game would be pretty tough. It's always tough going west, especially to the other side of the country. Cal's not one of those environments where it's going to be packed and there's momentum to be had or there's energy in the stadium to be had. It's sort of one of those where you got to motivate yourselves. It's a dead crowd, and they just didn't quite have it. The Tar Heels came back, and you probably watched that game a little bit more intently than I did, Beau, but it looked like they kind of put together some offense in the second half. Is that right?
Yeah, they definitely did. They got the ground game going a little bit. Nathan Elliott completed some passes to his own team rather than the other one. But the problem is, and I mean, I can just speak a little bit more in depth. Their wide receivers, they have talent. They don't have a quarterback to be able to get it to them. Right now, our only play to the wide receivers is throw it up for Anthony Ratliff-Williams and hope that he catches it. And we're so predictable. It's run up the middle. It's a screen to the wide receiver out wide. Most of the time to the short side of the field, which even me, who's played 1 year of organized football, thinks that is dumb. I think a lot of other people would say that's dumb too. And then our fourth play is throw it up for Anthony Ratliff-Williams and hope that he can come down with it. And the defense looked good in the first week against Cal, but looked awful in the second half of the ECU game.
That was one UNC I think was favored by 16 going into Dowdy-Ficklen.
Yeah, they were.
ECU was coming off a huge home loss to North Carolina A&T, which is an FCS school. Scotty Montgomery has looked like he may be fired before the season is even over. I thought this would be a good bounce-back game. UNC's tended to struggle against ECU in the past, and I saw some stats on Fedora's records against in-state opponents, and it's not that great, but I thought this one would be one where UNC would come back, get their bearings, really get locked in and go in and sort of feed off of that environment that is usually in place at ECU, but I don't know, they just didn't have it, and ECU kind of pounded the mare in the second half and really pulled away.
Now, what the discouraging thing is that we got worse as the game went on. The Tar Heels got worse as the game went on, which is, I think, is the first sign of a coaching issue.
You think the players are kind of giving up on the coaching staff?
I think he's just about lost the players. He's definitely lost the fan base. What do you
think about the suspended players now when they come back? Do you think that will make a huge impact? Obviously, it would give Fedora another potential quarterback in Chaz Surratt. But do you think that's enough to make a difference, or is this kind of like, well, they probably would have lost those games even with the players that are currently suspended?
We're missing 3 starters on defense this past week versus East Carolina. The 2 to injury, 1 through the suspension. I would admit that I think that those were big losses. Miles Dorn at safety, and Malik Carney on the defensive line. They were huge losses for us, but I mean, offensively, the offensive line's been terrible. The quarterback has been terrible. I don't think Surratt, although he's probably better than Nathan Elliott, I don't see our offensive scheme changing any. Maybe he's a bigger threat in the option. He can run the ball better than Nathan Elliott. But at this point, I mean, I've got to say the season is already lost. You lose to a ECU team who was ranked 121st in the country when you played them last week, and you weren't even competitive the whole game. You got blown out.
Right.
And that, like I said, that got worse. That's a sign of the players quit. I think it's a time. I think it is time for a coaching change. I think that you will see a coaching change in Chapel Hill. I think Fedora, his problems were not on. He had nothing to do with the academic / athletic scandal from the past. He inherited that problem, but there's still been off the field issues with him as coach as far as discipline, and that's another thing. Discipline. The penalties on the field are inexcusable. That's another thing that I think you can't look past. They've been the most penalized team in the nation, or sorry, not in the nation. I think in the conference. Seems like in the nation. I mean, they have seniors doing stupid stuff like hitting the quarterback out of bounds, lowering his head into his back when the dude's clearly out of bounds. It's just it's frustrating as a Tar Heel fan. I think that the success of Fedora relies mostly on the coordinators that he had in the past that have since moved on to bigger and better things as head coaches elsewhere. I think that he's one of those guys that Fedora can. I don't see him as a CEO of a football program. I think I look at him. People called him a offensive guru. He's more. I think he's only. You can only give him credit for being a special teams guru. That is the only thing that he's good at and good at coaching at. And so now that I've gone on my rant about Larry Fedora and how he should be, I think it will be seeing the end of him this season. And so I think to sum it up, Duke I think has looked the best so far. Closely followed by the Wolfpack. I think that's what we've kind of expected, though.
Right.
And
what would you say? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. What were you going to say?
No, you go ahead.
So just to switch gears one quick moment before we sign off, I just wanted to touch on one last thing. Sort of switching gears away from the local scene. Who do you have as your top 3 Heisman candidates right now? It's always fun to look back at this over the years, as every couple weeks as someone has a big game, they bump up in the Heisman rankings. Who do you have? In that right now?
I think Tua's got to be leading. And I was a doubter about his odds at the beginning of the year.
We need to get the clip. We need to get the audio clip. Where's our producer? We need to get him to play the audio clip of you preseason. How is Tua the Vegas odds leader to win the Heisman when he's not even the starter?
I'll just say it's a long season. It's a long season. He plays in the SEC, has not faced an SEC defense yet. So we'll see how that goes. He did play a Clemson defense last year and kind of torched them. But like I said, LSU's coming to town. Watch out for the Bayou Bengals defense.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, I mean, obviously you gotta say Tua. I think Bryce Love is still there. He's been kind of slow getting off the block this season. Bad first week.
He had a pretty good game against Southern Cal.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. He had a touchdown and over 120 yards, I believe. But I think half of those yards came on one run. If you take that one run away, he averaged about 3 yards of carry. But I mean, I don't want to take. I don't want to. I sound like I'm not crediting that one run. I mean, that's what you got to do. What you got to do. But yeah, I would have to say those are so far the two leaders right now. Still, the quarterback of Arizona is already out of it. What's his Khalil?
Kevin Sumlin might be looking for a new job at the end of the season.
Maybe.
I think Will Greer has got a good shot, and quarterbacks who sling the ball around a lot can fizzle out. But I think Will Greer's playing really well. He's putting up some really impressive numbers. Like you said, Bryce Love has got plenty of opportunities to sort of rebound from a sluggish start. And then I like Jonathan Taylor as well, the Wisconsin running back. He's putting up some crazy numbers there. Now, they haven't played anyone too tough, but still, the numbers that he's putting up, you got to like that as far as, when you're looking at stats at the end of the year, he's padded his stats pretty good in these past couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe as I look outside right now, I think Hurricane Florence might have made an early arrival. It sounds like, but yeah, we got a lot of games coming up that we're looking forward to. I think we're going to still try to keep on the schedule of every other week with the 919 College Football Podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed it so far. Kind of liked our opinions, disliked our opinions, and that's okay to dislike our opinions, and that's what really sports talk is all about, is when you don't like what someone says.
Right. Yeah, we're going to work on getting a call-in feature where we can get some live callers on here, maybe give us a little bit of a hard time, and we can share our expertise with the world via the call-in.
All right, before we sign off, Daniel, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just one last thing. Don't forget to check out the College Football Researchers Association poll. That is CFRApoll.com. Again, College Football Researchers Association poll. Give that its look. A buddy of mine has gotten this poll approved by the NCAA, so Beau and I are NCAA-approved voters. A lot of work goes into this poll, and it's taken pretty seriously, so give it a look and just check it out. Let us know what you think. Again, that website is CFRApoll.com.
All righty, thank you for that, Daniel. All right, that's the end of our second episode of the season. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Daniel. See you later.
All right, see ya.